that reinforcement rib that is cast into the housing. That feature there was only found on the early produced Willys Jeeps.
This episode of Inside Army Jeep Parts is brought to you by Holy Toledo calendars, nice enough for your coffee table, and the Dispatcher magazine. Get yours at norrisbenonis.com.
What we have next to us here is a Willys MB crated engine. This engine is as would have been packed up, actually in this particular case, June of 1944. And as you can see the crate here, it originally would have had a full crate around it to completely protect it for shipping purposes, and would have been sent anywhere in the world. Would have needed obviously engine spares for any war theater of operation. This one, when I purchased it, the crate, the upper portion of the crate had been removed and was gone, but it is a brand new June of 1944 engine. What they did on these engines is, you can see it's kind of glossy, and which, like, why would this engine be glossy? And it wouldn't have been if it had been installed in a Jeep on the assembly line. But what they did with the engines that were crated was they sprayed them down with like a lacquer protective coating. Obviously the idea was to try and preserve the paint and whatever else, depending on the conditions it might have seen while traveling and sitting in some location around the world. I don't know honestly how effective it was. So you can see spots on it where the lacquering has turned yellow, and it's on rubber components and things like that. You'll see it's cracked if you bend it because of that coating. On an earlier motor, this would have had a rubber boot just like that here. And they added this suppressor, similar to this piece here, inside with this special molded boot. And there again, that's a uniquely, shall we say, later feature. This is the radio suppressor here in question. There again, there were suppressors all over the Jeep, under the dash. There again, to basically deal with radio frequency wave interference. So if they did install a radio in the Jeep, it would suppress that noise so you get a clearer transmission. Also, they did it too, not just because if they were to put it in that vehicle, but proximity. So if this Jeep rolled up next to a radio Jeep, they did not want to have that radio interference bothering the radio Jeep that was in proximity to it. So it wasn't strictly just for the fact that they would have put a radio in that particular Jeep, but it was for general, because vehicles obviously would all be congregated together and therefore, you know, could interfere with any other vehicles that were transmitting. So this is the coil, and there was also, over the years, there's been many discussions about the coils, and this one here is smooth on the bottom. Ones that were used earlier had a stud on the bottom, and they actually ran a ground strap off the bottom of the coil up to the stud on the block. And that was sort of debated for years as to when that actually changed or when it occurred or anything else. Well, early Jeeps, 41s, up clearly to this point in the war, and I don't know exactly what the date is on the change, would have had the stud. And then they delete the stud and you do away with that grounding. You can see the star washers here on the bolts, and star washers were used all over the Jeep. And there again, it's to guarantee you have proper grounding. So they have little teeth on them, and they bite in, and they'll bite through the paint and into the metal. So those are all things we know for sure, not speculating if those things existed or were in production at that point in mid 44. So clearly, no, here it is. We know they were like that at that point in time. So if you own a Jeep that was built sometime in June or later, then we know clearly you should be using the lake type ignition wires, you should have a coil without a stud, those things, which are really cool because, like I say, there's no arguing with this motor. This particular engine I found back in the early 90s. I believe it was 1991 to be exact. And a gentleman in Brooklyn, New York, his name was Joseph Lipson, called me one day and said he had a collection of parts that he was looking to liquidate, including some trailers and some other things. So I arranged with Joseph to go up to Brooklyn and take a look at his collection. And we went up and looked and saw and did a deal. And the crown jewel of that buy was this motor. The interesting part here is the Jeep showing up on the head. Willys didn't put their name early on it. I think starting in 43, you will see Willys, and it's around the same time that you in turn see Jeep show up on the head, because the name Jeep is highly debated, to its origins, but this is clear here. Willys has staked a claim in the name Jeep. They're building a Jeep. So you go back to prototypes and then early production. Like I say, there's many stories about where the genesis of Jeep came from. But obviously, like I say, and I think it's around late 43 when the Jeep and the Willys start showing up on the cylinder head. I have always told people that have walked in to my business that, "Is that motor for sale?" I said, yes, but only if you offer me stupid money.
Will be CV2, take one, Mark.